Hi everyone, my name is Cassie Hamer. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Better Reading is a great community, so I'm delighted to have the chance to talk to you tonight about my latest book, The Truth About Faking It. I'm a Sydney-based author and I've actually written 3 novels, and this is my third. I also wrote After the Party, which you can see on the screen, and my second book was The End of Cuthbert Close. And I'm so stoked that both of those books have been voted into the Better Reading Top 100 over the last couple of years. It really is such a privilege to be in that amazing list. So thank you to all of the Better Reading community who might have voted for my books. Really appreciate it. Again, great of you to join me tonight. I've got my little glass here. Hope you're joining me with your beverage of choice as well as we talk about the book. So The Truth About Faking It is similar in some ways to my other books. It is entirely a standalone story, but I tend to write stories about women. Women and men both enjoy them, but I'm definitely proud to say that I'm a women's contemporary fiction author. And what I love in reading is books that have a dash of humor, a dash of intrigue, lots of great characters, and are the kind of book that make you just keep turning the page right until the end. So we've got a few people who've joined us. Hi, Wendy Kendall. She says, good evening, Cassie and all. Hi, Wendy. Hi, Christine. Thank you for joining us from Mount Helen. And Jessica Gill, thank you for joining as well. And Wendy is from Wagga. Oh, fantastic to see people from all over joining in. Hi, Tracy. Nice to see you as well. So a little bit about the book. It's a family drama, and it's about 3 generations of women from the same family who lead fairly chaotic lives that are thrown into further disarray by the mysterious death of the family's patriarch, David, who loses his life in quite cloudy and murky circumstances in Thailand. So there's Ellen, who's 69, and she's the family's matriarch, and she's pretty wild. She's pretty out there, and she's the character that I'm getting the most feedback on because she's not a sweet little old grandma. She is a really vital, vibrant, quite outrageous woman. If you sort of think Patsy from Ab Fab, and that's sort of the vibe. Just a few more hellos. Louise, thank you for coming. Joy Bell. Hi, Helen. Nice to see you. Michelle Upton. Jessie Joseph and Eunice from Inverloch in Victoria. So we've got Ellen, and then there's also Natasha, her daughter, who is 48, and she's a current affairs TV presenter, very tightly controlled. And she's got a really big secret from her past, which is about to blow up in her face. And then there's her daughter, Georgie, who's 22, and she works in reality TV as a producer on a show that's very much like The Bachelor. So it's all about the happy ever after. But the thing is, Georgie doesn't really believe in everlasting love. She is an absolute cynic about it. And that belief is about to be challenged in a really serious way when she starts developing feelings for a man that she really can't have. So that's the basic story. Gosh, lots of people joining in. Deborah Booth, Sabine, nice to see you. Also from Inverloch, Stacey from Newcastle, and Bronwyn from the Sunshine Coast. So in this book, quite a few of the characters work in the media, and it definitely is a book that has a lot to say about what happens in TV journalism and also in reality TV. And a lot of that is inspired by the experiences that I had working in television when I was in my 20s. So I'm going to talk about 3 pivotal moments from that career that really formed who I am today and certainly inspired the emotions in the book, I would say. So my career began when I was 20 years old. I was fresh out of uni, having studied communications, and I turned up for a fill-in gig as a TV reporter for the 6 p.m. news at Prime TV in Orange, which is in the New South Wales Central West, a beautiful, beautiful country town. So me, city slicker, I turn up in my cream pristine jacket and my matching cream mini skirt because this was the 90s and I loved Melrose Place, loved Amanda, loved her suits. So that's who I was channeling. Turned up looking like a vanilla ice cream. The news editor takes one look at me, sends me to the cattle sales. So the sale yards where they sell the cows. So for the next hour or two, I'm traipsing through cow paths, cow urine, trying to bone up on bovine sale prices, trying to fake it till I make it. Went back to the studio, wrote up my script, sat down, showed it to the news editor. He takes a look and just buries his head and just shakes his head and then starts muttering at the screen and then just looks at me and tears shreds off me for the terrible quality of the script that I'd presented. And this was, I think, the biggest dressing down I'd ever experienced in my 20 years. And I don't know, I don't think I deserved it, but that was media in the 90s. It didn't matter. My ambition was set in stone. My love for this job was not dimmed after that first day. When you're young and in your 20s, you just have this unshakable desire and belief to succeed. So I was set despite that first setback. So that was the first turning point, was getting that first job. Now, the second turning point was when I was working in Newcastle. So I'd graduated from Prime TV in Orange, worked at Prime in Coffs Harbour, was working my way up the ranks and found myself working for Prime TV in Newcastle at a really fascinating time because the steelworks there were closing. So it was a city in transition, and I got to cover that story of the BHP closure. And in fact, I won an award. I was named the Northern New South Wales Journalist of the Year for the work that I did on that particular news event. So things were going really well in my career. I had a fabulous female boss who was very encouraging, gave me lots of responsibility. Couldn't ask for a smarter, more savvy, more emotionally controlled boss. And I was loving it. It was really the job of my dreams. It was everything that I had wanted. Anyway, after a few years doing that great job, walked in one day and the boss of the station calls the entire newsroom together, about 15 of us, cameramen, reporters, editors, and announces that we're all out of a job, that we're all being made redundant, and that the newsroom is closing as of that minute, and we were not to put another bulletin to air that night. This was devastating. There were people in that newsroom who had families and, kids to look after. I was lucky in the sense that I was still in my 20s and didn't have those financial responsibilities, but it was essentially a massive career setback. So got in the car, came back to Sydney, which is where I grew up, moved back into the family home, my childhood home, managed to get a job at Channel 7 in Sydney. So that was another turning point because the career dream had always been to work for a major metropolitan TV station as an on-the-road 6 p.m. reporter. But that's not how you start in metropolitan news. I had to go back to the beginning, and I was working as a producer on the Sunrise show in the days where Mel Doyle and David Koch were presenters. And as a producer, I'd arrive at midnight, write up scripts, do voiceovers, and I'd be there till 8 o'clock in the morning. Shift work is a really hard gig, and I don't think I could have sustained it forever, but it was a starting point. And again, just tried to be diligent, just did my work, tried to do it the best that I could, and started to work my way up. It was a huge news time. We had the Bali bombings, the Asian tsunami happened, September 11 happened, and there's nothing like the adrenaline of a newsroom when huge news breaks. There's phones going, there's people running everywhere, there's people, satellite crosses being set up. It really is quite addictive and quite buzzy. So I was loving it again, thought it was great, and was starting to get some shifts as an on-the-road 6 p.m. reporter, to the point where I was getting more reporting shifts than I was producing. So I was essentially full-time on the road doing the job of my dreams. I dreamed of doing that since I was a teenager, and I'd done work experience on the Today Show with Steve Liebman and Liz Hayes, and that's when I'd fallen in love with the television industry. Anyway, again, on an ordinary weekday morning, the boss of the news calls me in for a chat about my future, sat me down and said, look, I don't actually see your future being in front of the camera. I want you to go back into production because I don't think that you have the X factor. I was a bit devastated. Honestly, I was crushed. I didn't understand really what he meant. Everything had been going so well. I always submitted my work on time, did it to the best of my ability. It didn't make sense. I suspected it was something to do with my appearance, though it was never said outright, because I had been sent to get some tips from hair and makeup over how to soften my look, because I used to wear my hair quite tightly pulled back. And the TV newsroom was a really blokey environment. They would all gather for drinks around the chief of staff's table on a Friday and drink beers, and I wasn't a beer drinker. I felt intimidated by that sort of blokey culture. I thought it was enough to do your job and do it well. The male journos never got spoken to about their appearance. So, the girls often got, or the women often got the fluffier stories, and the men got the hard news stories. So in hindsight, I can see that it was quite a sexist environment. And when the boss gave me that feedback, I decided I didn't want to be anymore in an industry where my future could be decided at the whim of one man's, subjective viewpoint, that it just wasn't a fair industry. So I left, and that was the end of that career. And I'm still processing the feelings over that, because in a way, I'm still angry. And so I've channeled a lot of those feelings into the book. So there are some quite significant themes around sexism and misogyny and ageism in news and the ethics of news. It is a fun read. There are some, I think, quite high camp scenes, especially with the disposal of David's ashes. And so initially this book was actually going to be called Out of the Ashes, but that was a bit too serious. The Truth About Faking It plays on, that idea of faking it in a bedroom sense, which does happen, but it's much more about the emotional armor and the lies that we tell ourselves and the way we present ourselves in a less than authentic way to the world. So now I'm just going to read out a few of the comments. I hope I haven't missed any actual questions yet. Mary commented that the newsroom sounds exciting. It absolutely was. Exciting, thrilling, fast-paced. Occasionally there was a lot of sitting around waiting outside courtrooms, which was deadly boring, or waiting outside people's houses for someone to turn up. So there could be real periods of nothing at all and then just mad panic. And that 6 p.m. deadline is so finite. You have to make it or you failed. And I still have recurring nightmares about not getting my story in on time. So that has stayed with me forever. But deadlines are fantastic, actually, for fiction writers, for training to be a fiction writer. That concept of having a self-imposed deadline and working to a deadline is really useful when you're a writer and you want to write 2,000 words a day and you might not be feeling it, but when you're a journalist, you just have to sit down and do it. And I think that's the same with fiction. Donna Downey has said, love your writing so much. Just finished Cuthbert Close and reading After the Party now. Can't wait for your next one. Oh, thank you so much, Donna. That is just such lovely feedback to hear. Mary has said that, yeah, the newsroom environment's very interesting. Deborah has said, go you. Thank you, Deborah. I think I'm a lot older and wiser, and if anything, stronger in my feminist beliefs and ideals these days. And I think the other thing I haven't spoken about is how I was inspired by younger women such as Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame in the writing of this book. I actually finished writing the draft of this before Grace Tame was made Australian of the Year, but her bravery and her courage in speaking out and owning her story is definitely a theme that runs through this book. And the lovely Tricia Stringer gave me a beautiful quote saying that it's a brilliant, timely, relevant read about the power of speaking up. And I think she nailed it. Wendy says, all this experience has certainly given you a lot of backstory for writing. How do you, however, make your way with your confidence building out of this? Yeah, my confidence was definitely knocked. I think you're referring to when I got told I didn't have the X factor. I think in a way I was, though, more angry in a sense, and I hate to say that I did a dummy spit and just walked away, but in essence, I mean, it was a calculated decision, but it did knock my confidence. And I still think, I think all of us have that sense sometimes that we're imposters. And I still feel it with writing. I feel it sometimes with parenting, that I just don't know what I'm doing, and why did someone put me in charge of 3 children when I'm just sort of making it up as I go along and doing the best that I can. But do I have all the answers? No, I don't. So I think all of us do fake it in a way in different aspects of our lives, not just in our career, but in our personal lives as well. Deborah Stevens said, so sad, but I'm glad you decided to go with your values intact. Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say that that man did me a favor, because I don't believe that he did. But at the end of the day, I'm doing now what I love. Fiction writing does suit who I am, because I am at heart a little bit of an introvert. I love being at home. Lockdown was at times hard, but part of it was really pleasant to not have to go anywhere. So maybe now I'm doing the job I was meant to do. But yeah, I can't say I'm grateful to that man for crushing my dreams, essentially. Wendy says, did you do any other jobs prior to starting writing? Well, from journalism, I did spend a little bit of time in PR, but I was working for a toll road company, and honestly, trying to put a positive spin on toll roads is next to impossible. And I used to have to deal with customer complaints, and they would write things like, your company, you people are no better than a pimple on my bottom. And I was like, I just felt bad. So I didn't last that long in PR. I then, since then, have done freelance writing and a little bit more media work, some podcasting, a fair bit of writing for a parenting website called KidSpot. But now I'm a full-time fiction writer. Bar Cohen. Hi, Bar. Nice to see you. Enjoying this, Cassie, starting your new book tonight. Fantastic. Thank you, Bar. Joy Bell, tell us about your book characters. Okay, yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, Ellen, who's the 69-year-old, is Zumba loving, life drawing, very active, strong sense of self, but that has been somewhat diminished by the fact that she's found herself in quite difficult financial straits. So she's very typical of women of that era who have quit their jobs to raise children and have done that loyally and faithfully and stayed with their husbands throughout until the kids got older And then for one reason or another, perhaps the marriage has ended, or perhaps there's been illness or an accident. And suddenly an older woman can find herself in very difficult financial straits because she doesn't have the superannuation in the bank, because she stayed at home and worked as the homemaker to look after the kids. And so I don't know if it's commonly known that women over the age of 50 are the fastest growing group of homeless. Now, Ellen doesn't become homeless, but she's certainly in a very difficult financial position. And that is quite a theme in the book, about her limited choices to get herself out of that financial difficulty. And then Natasha, the key word with Natasha is control. She's very controlled in her work. She, as the TV presenter, always has her game face on. She's very good at suppressing her emotions. She's probably the character I most identify with, but she's the one I found the most difficult to write because she is so suppressed in her emotions. And so my publisher was saying to me, yes, but what does Natasha think? She must have an internal monologue going on. So I really had to dig deep to bring her out. And then Georgie, who's 22, who is just so much fun to write. I love writing in younger people's voices. And I loved getting into the culture of reality television, which I find both deeply interesting, repulsive, awful, fantastic, can't look away. And I did quite a bit of research into the tactics that reality TV producers use to manipulate contestants on their shows, because it is highly, highly manipulated what we see. You know, we see bits of one interview stuck together with a bit of another interview, and suddenly a character on the show is saying something that they never actually said in real life. You know, there's a comment in the book that says, the television definition of reality bears little relationship to the dictionary definition. So that was fun. Now, I just want to make sure I'm getting to the comments. Christina Signorini said, I've loved your previous novels. Thanks so much, Cassie. A lot of heart and wisdom in them. Looking forward to reading your new book. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Christina. I definitely try to bring the heart. It is hard to dig deep into your own emotions sometimes, but I really think this book in particular is the one that goes the deepest with emotion. Sally Smith says, we all make it up while bringing up children. And that's really reassuring to hear. Sometimes I think the most powerful thing we can do as parents is be honest about our struggles with it, and sharing your struggles is the greatest gift I think that you can give another parent who's having a tough time. Eunice says, there is no one in the world like our children, so we can only go with whatever they present in the future. Yeah, it is true. And children change and evolve day by day. And what a child needs today is not necessarily what they're going to need in 6 months. I mean, I have a teenager who's 13, and she literally turned into a teenager overnight, it felt like. And that is a huge, huge readjustment. She's a wonderful kid, but it's not without its challenges. And I've not had a teenager before, and it's hard. I really sometimes feel at a bit of a loss as to what is the right thing to do, but I'm just trying to be present for her and keep open the lines of communication. I feel like that's probably the best thing that I can do for her, because she doesn't need me as much from a functional sense. She can dress and get herself organized and get herself places, but emotionally she really needs, I think, someone to be there for her, and that's what I'm trying to do, not always succeeding. Happy Valley Books Read, hi guys, nice to see you. And they say, hello Cassie, great book review up tonight. Oh, I'm a bit nervous, you guys, your opinion means a lot to me, so I really hope that you enjoyed it. You're such amazing readers. Julie says, oh dear, Ellen sounds like me, so I'd better read the book. Oh, Julie, let me tell you, Ellen has a couple of little habits, which, no judgment from me, but if you have them as well, I'd be a little surprised. I'll just say that. My mother has some similarities to Ellen, in that my mum plays bridge and Ellen plays bridge, and my mum does Zumba and Ellen does Zumba. But I was very careful to write in the acknowledgements that Ellen is not based on my mum, because she does one or two things that my mother would never do. And this is the challenge with fiction, that when you're writing characters, you do draw on personal experience. But here's the deal. Here's what we do. So characters are basically 1/3 ourselves, so 1/3 me, 1/3 someone we know, so 1/3 my mum, and then 1/3 complete imagination. And that's really, I think, pretty true about how fiction writers form their characters. Christine Shemister says, which authors inspire you? Great question. Without doubt, the author who's most inspired me is Liane Moriarty. So the first book of hers that I read was The Husband's Secret. And it was a revelation. I mean, it's just a great book, but what she does so beautifully is marry quite dark themes, but with a really light touch. So you can find yourself sort of laughing and smiling, and then she really hits you with an emotional sort of punch. And her characters are just so fully formed that until then, I'd been writing quite serious fiction and not really getting anywhere with it. And she was the author who really freed me into introducing humour into my writing and embracing my natural voice, which I think has a bit of a mix of light and a little bit of shade as well. Costa. Hi, Costa. Was it hard to get your book published? Yes. Getting the first book published, which was After the Party, was really difficult. I approached lots of agents. I approached lots of publishers. I'd nearly given up hope. And then I got that magic phone call from Harlequin, which is the part of the HarperCollins group. And that was the magic phone call. I often say that finding a publisher is a bit like blind dating, in the sense that you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. And there's not always a guarantee that you do find that prince, and it comes down to luck and timing and chemistry and just finding someone who gets you and gets what you do. So I think writing is 95% hard work and 5% luck, but you have to have the full 100%. And so you can have written the best book, but you just need to find that person who's going to champion your work. And so, yeah, for me, I'd nearly given up on ever seeing After the Party published, and just was so thrilled and delighted when I got a publishing deal with Harlequin to have 2 books published, and then a further 3 books published. So, yes, I feel very lucky. Do your characters take on their own life when you're writing? This is from Lisa Porter Wren. Lisa, that is a tough question to answer, because some authors say, that when they're writing, it's like their characters are speaking to them and they do start acting in ways they don't expect. And I envy that. That sounds amazing, but it's not really how it happens for me. I sit down and I direct them, but I do see the action playing out a bit like a movie in my head. So when it's going really well, you are sort of just describing what you're seeing. And at some point, I get to know my characters enough to know what they would do and what they wouldn't do. So in a sense, they do take on their own life, but I'm very still much the puppet master, I suppose. But I do get to know them more as I go along. And that takes time. It's like any relationship. It takes time to get to know someone. And it takes time even to get to know your own fictional characters, because it is just such a challenge to create a 3-dimensional, fully fledged human being on the page. And it's just a matter of sometimes it taking time, I suppose. Now, I think we're nearly out of time. Did anyone have any last questions or comments? Yes, thank you very much to Better Reading for hosting tonight. They've put up some links about where you can buy the book. I'm online. I'm on Instagram. I think I'm Cassie Hamer Writer, and I think I'm Cassie Hamer Writer on Facebook as well. I love to hear from people, even just to talk about other people's books. In fact, I prefer talking about other people's books, to be honest. So just finally, Wendy has said, thank you for speaking with us tonight, Cassie. Always enjoy these sessions. The backstory and inspiration to write novels is very interesting. Best wishes with the new book. Look forward to reading your work sometime. Thank you, Wendy. Christine, thank you so much for tonight, Cassie. I'm looking forward to reading your new book. Deborah, so lovely to meet you, and likewise. Jessica says thank you, and Lisa says love hearing about your process. Congratulations on getting your books published. And Sally Smith says thanks, looking forward to reading your book. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all your excellent questions and comments. It's very hard to just sit here and talk by yourself for half an hour if there's not people interacting and asking questions. So even though I can't see you, I definitely feel your support and feel your presence and really appreciate it. So I'm going to finish it up there. Thank you again. Happy reading. And yeah, hopefully I'll speak to you again soon. Okay, bye.